Well, Philadelphia looks like a third world dump while the Federal Reserve just burned $2.5 billion on a shiny new palace for themselves. Garbage is piled 30 feet high in the city of brotherly love. 9,000 workers have had enough. And what's the Fed doing? Gouging cities like Philly with sky high rates, then wasting your money while they do it. I mean, just imagine you're working two jobs, paying some insane taxes, and you're watching your neighborhood drown in trash while the elites in DC throw parties in marble halls. That's not an accident. That's what happens when the Fed's out of control and America's workers are getting kicked aside. But there's where it gets good, guys. President Trump's team, led by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, just dropped a truth bomb that could blow the lid off of Jerome Powell's entire operation. In fact, Bessent just called out the waste, exposed the lies, and made it crystal clear. This circus, it's ending, and America's workers are coming first again. So in this video, I'm going to break down exactly how Philly's meltdown just exposed Powell's biggest failure, why Scott Bessent's next move could change the Fed forever, and how Trump's plan is about to rip the mask off this entire elite racket step by step. And trust me, guys, you're going to want to hear Scott Bessent's final line on whether Jerome Powell should keep his job. It's going to shock you. So I don't know, grab a coffee, grab a water or something like that, because once you see what's happening behind the garbage piles and the marble walls, you're never going to see the Fed the same way again. Also, I appreciate you guys hitting the like button and sharing this video and subscribing to the channel. You're absolutely amazing and super duper supportive. So thank you guys. All right. So let's go ahead and break down exactly how all of this connects, why Philadelphia's garbage mountains just cracked open a massive door on Jerome Powell's Fed that they really didn't want you looking through. All right. So Donald J. Trump is taking action, and thank God for that, because if you thought cities like Philadelphia were collapsing under Joe Biden's watch, you'd be right. But this mess didn't vanish overnight. In fact, it's still rotting on the streets, literally. Okay, so right now, one of America's oldest, proudest cities, the so-called city of brotherly love, is buried under mountains of garbage that's so high, you would think a tornado dumped a landfill in the middle of town. Guys, 9,000 municipal workers, the people who keep the lights on, the water flowing, the 911 calls answered, they had enough. This is the first major strike in almost 40 years, and it's hitting the worst at the worst possible time. A brutal summer heat wave, baking piles of trash 20, 30 feet high into walls of rot that smell so bad that people can't even walk their kids past them. That's not just a local nuisance. That is a symbol of something rotten in how America is run at the top. And trust me, guys, it ties directly back to the Fed and Powell's so-called leadership. But stick with me, guys, because I'm going to connect that dot in a second. So let's get real. Who is to blame for the stinking mess, right? Well, the finger pointing, the fingers are pointing straight at Philadelphia's own leaders. And more importantly, at how elite spending priorities work. Mayor Cheryl Parker, deep blue, virtue signaling Democrat, refuses to pay these workers a fair wage. Is that okay? I don't think that's okay. All they're asking for is a freaking 5% raise over 3 years. This is nothing. It's pennies. Not when you factor in inflation that's been chewing away at people's paychecks for years. Anybody else feeling that, right? Meanwhile, the same city hall that claims that it's broke, they somehow found $60 million. Then they found another $25 million to hand out rent subsidies, including for people who weren't even here legally. Now think about that for a second, guys. Philadelphia is a sanctuary city, is it not? So the mayor brags about protecting outsiders, but won't protect the very people who make the city run. Sanitation crews, 911 operators, street maintenance, all these guys, all these girls, women, men, they're the lowest paid municipal workers in any major U.S. city. They're literally keeping Philly from becoming a disease outbreak, but they get told to settle for scraps while the political class just burns through millions on pet projects and press releases. So here's what I find super duper ironic, and it's the twist that the media will not talk about. This local crisis only looks local. The same backward priorities that reward elites and punish working people, that's exactly how the Fed is run too. And that's where Scott Bessent and Trump's plan comes crashing into this mess. Now, the reason why I decided to partner with Chapter might surprise you. It's because they make brokers mad. Why? Because brokers pick and choose from a very tiny stack of plans, the ones that pay them the best, the ones that pay them the biggest commissions. Well, Chapter, they compare every single plan in your zip code. So there's no kickbacks, there's no nonsense, just a clear answer to the question, am I overpaying or not? Julie in Kansas, she unfortunately trusted her local broker until she realized that it was costing her money every time she visited her doctor. Julie said, I was paying extra just to see the person I've trusted for 10 years. Chapter stepped in, showed me a better option, and now I'm saving $400 every single year. Or take Sharon Bertusik. Medicaid kicked her off when she needed it the most. She thought it was game over for her. She said, Chapter got me a plan with zero premium, zero drug costs, and dropped my copay from $89 to $20. I thought that there was no way out. They found one. So guys, this is exactly why I share their number every single week, because I want you to know how much your plan could be costing you. And I also want you to know how fast that can change. So give our friends at Chapter a call right now and just see if you're overpaying. And if they end up saving you money, I'd love to hear from you too. I want to hear your success story. So it's a free call and it's a free service. They don't charge you a dime. Call them right now. Phone number's down below, 909-563-8279. Or better yet, click the link that I left for you in the pinned comment down below or in the description at askchapter.org/Ron. You don't owe your broker your last dollar. You owe yourself the truth. Now, all right. So I want to, here's where Philly's trash piles slam right into Jerome Powell's Fed. And more importantly, why Trump's Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent just put that man on blast. Now, most people don't connect the dots between a garbage pile in Philly and the marble hallways of the Federal Reserve. But if you really look at the numbers, it's all tied together. And here's how. Like, while these 9,000 workers are begging for basic raises, the city's budget is getting squeezed dry. Why? Because Powell's Federal Reserve keeps interest rates stuck way too high for way too long. When rates are high, guess what happens? You got cities like Philadelphia, they have to pay more just to borrow. More debt service, less money for sanitation, 911 dispatch, maintenance, basic civilization. So while Philly is rotting under a big, massive heat wave, Jerome Powell and his Fed pals, they just blew $2.5 billion on a brand new headquarters for themselves in D.C., a luxury palace, if you will. Meanwhile, working class neighborhoods can't even get the trash picked up. What is wrong with this picture here? You know who's had enough? Bill Pulte. Yeah, the housing guy flat out demanded Powell resign immediately because of this reckless waste. Now, y'all let me know if Powell should resign today. And for good reason. It's the perfect symbol of the disconnect. Fancy buildings for the elite, garbage mountains for the people paying the bills. But the real shock came when Scott Bessent stepped up, because unlike the swamp, he didn't hold back. And what he just said about Jerome Powell should have every power broker in DC wide awake right now. So here's where Bessent stunned everyone. Maria Bartiromo flat out asked him if he wants Jerome Powell gone because of that $2.5 billion boondoggle, the bloated budget, the tone-deaf decisions. Did Bessent dodge? Nope. He made it crystal clear. While working Americans are fighting for basic dignity, the Fed has no business wasting billions on marble offices. He told the country, the entire financial class, that it's time for the Fed to right size its bloated empire and get its spending under control. And this is the bigger point that people need to hear. Under Trump, waste is not an option. Powell can cling the high rates and fancy buildings all he wants, but Bessent and Trump's team, they're exposing the fraud and they're cutting off the gravy train. So he said it straight up. This administration will not stand by while everyday Americans get squeezed dry so the Fed can throw parties in glass towers. Anybody agree with President Trump on that one? Now, here's the kicker. Bessent, he's not alone. The Freedom Caucus, the so-called deficit hawks in the Senate, they're all in lockstep with him and with Trump. They know that this fight isn't just about Philly's trash piles or Powell's new headlines. It's about ending the era where elites spend whatever they want while you pick up the trash. You see what I'm saying here? So here's the twist that mainstream media won't tell you. This crisis in Philly is not just about a stubborn mayor. I mean, they do have a stubborn mayor, but it's not just about that. It's also tied straight to the top. Jerome Powell's Fed. You see, guys, when the Fed keeps interest rates sky high, even when inflation is cooling off, guess who pays the price? Well, cities do, states do, taxpayers do. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent just laid it out. Philadelphia's budget is already stretched thin because when rates are this high, cities pay more to borrow just to keep the lights on and basic services running. So this means City Hall has less cash for the workers who haul your trash, answer a 911 call, or fix a broken water main. All right. Now, instead, they're cutting checks to bondholders and paying interest on debt. Interest that's bloated by the same Fed that claims it's fighting for your best interest. And while Philly rots, the Fed is building itself a $2.5 billion marble fortress in D.C. Think about that. Think about that for a second, guys. Bill Pulte called them out this week. Bill Pulte said, essentially demanding Jerome Powell resign for blowing billions on a luxury headquarters while American cities are drowning in debt and decay. So how many sanitation workers could you pay for with $2.5 billion? Do the math, right? How many Philly kids could play in a clean park instead of walking past mountains of filth, right? The answer is thousands. But Powell's Fed, they would rather upgrade their wallpaper and fancy carpets instead. So here's where it gets good, because Trump's team is not afraid to call this guy out by name. Scott Bessent, calm, sharp, no nonsense. He was asked point blank if he wants Powell to quit. Did he dodge? Not a chance, guys. He talked straight into the camera and said, the Fed should right-size their budget like everyone else in this season of belt tightening. So in plain English, cut the waste. Stop burning taxpayer money on palaces while cities like Philly fall apart. So here's what matters. Bessent made it very clear. He made it crystal clear. This isn't just talk. He's in lockstep with the Freedom Caucus, the Senate deficit hawks, and President Trump himself. The White House is not handing out blank checks to DC elites anymore. When Scott Bessent says he is a deficit hawk, he means it. When he says Trump is a deficit hawk, he means it. And that scares the life out of Powell's insiders, because it means the days of cushy Fed spending sprees are numbered. So now here's where the panic at the Fed really kind of ramps up, because while Jerome Powell is clinging to the old broken game, President Trump and Scott Bessent, they just rewrote the rules. The big, beautiful bill, yes, the same one that President Trump just signed with a grin on his face on Independence Day, responsibly raises the debt ceiling by $5 trillion. But it's not just a blank check. It is tied to tough spending constraints that force bloated agencies to trim the fat. And here's the master stroke. While Powell keeps overnight rates high, Bessent's Treasury isn't locking America into expensive long-term debt at those punishing rates. Instead, they're rolling over that massive $9 trillion short-term debt, which is a rather smart move that saves you and me billions of wasted interest payments. Scott Bessent made it plain as day. America has massive demand from investors at home and abroad for our debt. So he's methodically managing it to the best deal for the taxpayers. All right. Calm, methodical, zero panic. Meanwhile, Scott Bessent slammed the old myth that Trump's tariffs caused runaway inflation. It didn't cause runaway inflation. He called it what it is: tariff derangement syndrome. Inflation is coming down. Supply chains are healing. And it's happening because President Trump didn't cave into the globalists. He stood his ground. So when Jerome Powell says that we have to keep rates high just in case, Scott Bessent's exposing that for the fear tactic that it is, because real data shows Trump's policies are working without choking American cities to death. And so here's the piece that really has Powell's buddies sweating through their suits. They've lost control of the story. For years, the Fed used fear, inflation, panic, recession panic, right, to justify high rates and endless spending for themselves, really. But now, Philly's strike makes that story look like a cruel joke. Those 30-foot tall trash mountains, those are the real life consequences of Jerome Powell too high for too long experiment, right? When borrowing costs spike, cities cut wages first, not to their own perks, not to the mayor's luxury office furniture, but to the paychecks of the folks who do the dirtiest work. And we're seeing it. Okay, Trump and Scott Bessent have flipped that upside down. They're showing people that the real problem is not American workers demanding a living wage. It's a rotten, outdated Fed clinging to power while everyone else pays the price. And it's not just talk. Jerome Powell's own $2.5 billion Fed headquarters is now the symbol of that rot. Even big voices like Bill Pulte, they're publicly calling for Powell to step down. And Bessent, he's keeping that pressure dialed all the way up. So here's where the rumor mill hits overdrive, okay? Because after that blunt call out, the big question buzzing around DC backrooms right now is, will Scott Bessent replace Jerome Powell? Now, honestly, the pieces are falling right into place. Scott Bessent's name is already on Trump's shortlist for the next Fed chair. And if you watched his face when asked about it, he didn't deny it. He just smiled that calm, razor-sharp smile and pretty much said what a patriot would say. He'll serve wherever President Trump thinks he's needed the most. So he calls being Treasury Secretary the best job in Washington. And why wouldn't he? He gets to work directly with a cabinet that actually believes in fixing this mess, not managing its decline. But Scott Bessent also made it pretty clear. If Trump says step up, he'll step up. So now, compare that to Powell. Bloated budgets, bloated buildings, same broken excuses. Then you got Scott Bessent, calm, precise, methodical, exactly the style that made Trump's first term economically unstoppable. Now remember, 2 Fed seats open next year. Trump's got the power and the mandate to reshape that board completely. And if Scott Bessent's anywhere near that decision, you better believe the Fed's gravy train days are numbered. And that pretty much brings us to the part of the legacy media doesn't want to exist. The real plan for real American growth. So while Jerome Powell's Fed obsesses over defending its marble towers, Trump and Bessent, these guys are laser focused on unleashing Main Street. Deregulation isn't just a buzzword. This is the backbone of the America First economy. And so it's how you take the brakes off small banks, the same banks that keep towns like Philly alive. Now, right now, small banks are suffocating under leftover rules from the last financial crisis. Trump's new Vice Chair Bowman is already working to roll that nonsense back safely. Meanwhile, President Trump's big, beautiful bill locks in full expensing certainty for American businesses. So factories that were frozen in limbo for years can finally break ground today, knowing that they'll get every tax advantage that they were promised. And of course, if you think Philly's if you think Philly's trash strike is just about garbage, think again, guys. This is a perfect snapshot of how elite bloat and local neglect strangle America's potential. Trump's plan slices through all of that. Clear the red tape, break the Fed's waste cycle, unleash workers and employers to build, hire, and expand. Oh, and there's more. We're talking pipelines, guys. AI infrastructure, permitting reform, the nuts and bolts that turn slogans into real jobs, real paychecks, real American independence. So here we are. We're standing right in front of mountains and mountains of trash that aren't just rotting on Philly streets. They're rotting out their entire list that America has to settle for, right? Philly's meltdown is the wake up call, the stinking billboard that shows exactly what happens when local lenders, local leaders waste your money on virtue signals while Powell's Fed bleeds cities dry with reckless, sticky high rates and billion-dollar vanity projects. But here's what should really just kind of give every working American some real hope. President Trump and Bessent, they're not running the same old playbook. All right. They're not patching potholes on a sinking ship. They're actually rebuilding the dock. So no more blank checks for marble places in DC. No more pretending that sky high rates help workers when all they do is protect the people inside those palaces. No more leaving cities to fend for themselves while the elite hands themselves raises. Trump and Bessent are proving every day with the big, beautiful bill, with smart debt management, with real deregulation, that they'll fight tooth and nail for the people who are keeping America running, not the people who run their mouths in press conferences. And if Jerome Powell thinks that he can just skate by while trash piles up and families suffer, he better think again, because Bessent's name is on that door. The pressure's building, and when these 2 Fed seats eventually open up next year, the panic in that building, it's going to make this Philly meltdown look like a garden party, okay? So if you're tired of seeing American workers treated like garbage while elites waste your money on marble halls, stick with me, guys, because we're going to keep pulling back the curtain. We're going to keep calling out the rot. And of course, we're going to make sure to show exactly how President Trump's plan puts your paycheck, your community, and your family first every single time. So drop me a comment down below real quick. Tell me what you think. Should Bessent replace Jerome Powell? Should Philly's mayor be forced to answer for this garbage mess? And do you trust this team to keep exposing the elite games that, the way that they just did? Like, share, and subscribe to the channel, because the next phase is coming real fast. And trust me, guys, you're not going to want to miss what happens next. So anyway, I'll see you guys on the next video. America first, every single day.